Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Matthias, who is CEO of Companjon. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Alex. Great to be here with you. Yeah, looking forward to a great discussion.
Good stuff. Well, look, I always like to kick things off by allowing you to introduce the business and giving the most accurate representation of the business before I make a terrible attempt at it. So it'd be great if you could explain, the Companjon business model and what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So as you nicely introduced me, I'm CEO of Companjon, and I'm also the co-founder of Companjon, about 2.5, roughly 3 years ago. What does Companjon actually do? So we actually here to surprise our customers and to change the way people think about insurance. How are we doing this? We basically want to support our business partners, end customers in their daily lifestyle. Most of these customers are actually millennials. They live in a digital world, and they're looking for solutions that help them supporting their daily needs, being providing flexibility, providing them certain insurance covers, being just supporting them when life actually happens. And we do this obviously through, as we call it, embedded solutions that are usually embedded in the offering of our business partners. Sales channels or supporting the products they actually selling. Mm-hmm. So that's basically what we do for a living, quite successfully.
Good, thank you. So, I mean, embedded, if I would say parametric was probably the buzzword of the start of 2021, 2020. I'd say that 2022 is already probably being the buzzword of embedded. It's probably more conversations around that than any other. What's specifically unique to what Companjon is offering? Is it the insurances you're targeting? Is it your specific, like your customer? What's particularly different about your specific angle on embedded solutions?
So the way we design the solutions are purely customer driven. So we're trying to understand with our business partners. So first of all, we are B2B business, start with that. B2B2C, meaning we support our business partners to meet their customer needs in whatever shape or form. And by doing so, obviously, we try always to come from the customer's end of what are they looking for, what are their needs, what are their desires. I'll give you a couple of examples. In this world we're living in at the moment, they looking for flexibility, meaning cancellation is a key buzzword these days. So we're providing all these cancellation products. Second, in that thing, they want to have security and transparency, meaning, they don't want to have any hidden T's and C's that prevent them if something actually happens. So as a simple example, we provide all our solutions are actually include and have always been including a certain COVID cover. For instance, we provide also, our products are very easy to understand. So there's full transparency, there's no hidden things, etc. And we love claims, another piece. So our processes and our setups are designed the way that we actually fulfill the promise and not kind of make it very cumbersome for the end customer. And afterwards, if something actually happens, that they get their pay or their support or whatever. So we love claims on that end, and that's where I would call, you mentioned the parametric piece also kicks in, is all our products are end-to-end fully designed through, because we are, besides distributing the things, we actually also are the underwriter that allows us actually to make that promise happen, that allows us to have products designed which are very high claims frequency. So for delay products, for instance, we pay on every 5th or 6th flight, for instance, which is amazing for the end customer. Or we also kind of support the engagement of our business partners, customers on a day-to-day business, which is usually one of the key things why they also use us as their main provider. I hope that explains.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to me that obviously you made the decision to be a full stack insurer from the outlay. Was there ever a consideration to sort of perhaps just offer the technology or offer the same solution, but with because obviously going full stack, that's a much harder thing to kind of get off the ground. You've chosen the big challenge, the big meaty challenge version of this. But did you consider another method?
Actually, from the beginning, it was clear that we had to have the insurance underwriting capabilities to be a trustful partner. If you want to live the dream of saying, we want to have a really straight through, hassle-free new way of insurance works, you have to completely redesign the product. Otherwise, it won't happen. It's like designing, if you go an analogy and say designing a new way of cars should operate. Take Tesla as an example. If they just have taken a standard classical gas-driven car and then just exchange it with a electric engine and not changing everything else, it's different. So same thing we do. So we design. The only way to actually be able to do that, you have to design end-to-end all the elements of an insurance solution, being it in the underwriting, being it and also in the claims process. You need to think about how you actually track on where you get third-party data for at the beginning once you design the product, not at the end when you actually have the claim, for instance. And all this, it is actually of utmost importance that you actually have the capability to underwrite and also to take fast decisions. In the new world, it's not like, you design an insurance solution and then you basically have it valid out there for 1 year. Then the terms and conditions stay, the pricing comes in a little pricing sheet, etc., and that's done for a year. And then you see how it operates. The new world does it completely different. You want to test out what the customer actually expects. You want to test out like what is actually required from the customer side, and they give it pretty direct feedback, being it directly in chats or just on their buying behaviors, on how they buy certain coverages or solutions. So what you actually need to do is you need to fast test all the time to be able to meet the current customers' lifestyles and needs. And by the way, that has changed completely over the last 24 months. As we do, bi-yearly or twice a year, basically a customer survey with over 5,000 customers, you actually see how that has changed to, accepting a certain I would say a certain cumbersomeness to expecting a much more highly flexible setup. The needs have shifted to much more flexibility, to much more transparency also on the other end, to understand what is really covered and what not, etc. And to do that, to actually have the capability to make decision what you underwrite and what not, to make decision on how fast can you change prices, how fast can you adapt your product. And we can adapt our products within days, weeks max to do that. We can run 2-3 tests at the same time, iterate them to have the best result for our business partners and their customers.
Is that why, or is that why, as a sort of leading question, but with sort of digitally native insurance offering, such as Companjon, it's interesting. There's a couple of things that I was kind of like wanted to pick up. Was essentially that people's lifestyles change. So we're actually talking about not just offering existing covers in a different way. We actually talk about offering covers that didn't exist without these kind of unique combinations of embedded insurance and parametric. I'm thinking particularly, I think whether sort of weather or climate related, if it rains on a sporting event or if it rains on an event, I think that sort of cover, something that everyone's kind of been after, but haven't been able to kind of work in a practical sense. Can you build a moat around these sorts of offerings, or do you think someone will really own this space in a way that insurance offerings of the past, the incumbent insurance, have been able to do? I'm sort of interested to sort of see whether we think we're kind of competing, or we're really sort of talking about new coverages that we can own the relationship of, because we can leave some of the kind of existing traditional insurance to the sort of incumbent insurer class.
Well, I would say it's both. So yeah, basically I would say you have three stacks on this. So you have to, I would, as in at the beginning of this chat, you also mentioned the word add-on insurance. Add-on insurance exists for many years already, so it's nothing new. But what it basically was, as we call it in insurance 1.0, zero setup, meaning you take an existing traditional product, you might slice and dice it a bit, and then you sell it online. Then over the last couple of years now, last 3-4 years, we started to actually make this event specific, meaning you reduce the time span of having a yearly coverage to a month, and now we are down to which we also do obviously is like daily coverage on travel, daily cancellation on certain things with reasons, while all these things still kept the claims process the old way it always has been. Yeah, you're sending a proof in, people look at that either manually or digitally, it doesn't matter, and then it gets processed. So that space still exists, and that space still will exist. It might be just a little different the way you do it. So these kind of setups. Then you have probably new covers, which allow you, given the new latest technology, which are purely data driven, using third-party data, being it on the delay side, delay on arrival guarantees or departures, etc. Just to mention a few things, having a certain sunshine guarantee in whatever shape or form. They're quite interesting solutions, just not just the soccer game around the corner that you could think of. And then there is the third piece, which we then moving step into this, is I would say more the blockbuster product of the traditional insurers. So imagine a world where you're actually taking a simple example, taking your digital nomads these days. Yeah, they know when they're at home and when they're not at home. So you can actually adjust your premium based on when they're at home and not at home, which then moves more and more into the traditional way of how where you have I would say the high revenue products in the traditional space. You could do the similar things for car insurance, so motor is the same thing. You could look at it in a pretty similar way, and the way it gets distributed is also kind of exactly that. You can distribute these products and afterwards through your phone, meaning through your telephone company. You can even to your company that provides you with gas and electricity, or any other one you could think of. So that will change also in the more traditional ways of product lines, as you mentioned. Does this happen already? Absolutely. So we are not the first ones in Europe in this thing. So if you look a little bit around, probably a little bit more east, and sometimes also a little bit more west, you actually see that is already happening. So these are things you could also embed. Is it happening today? Probably not. Tomorrow, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said it, actually, because I think a lot of time we've had guests on the podcast who talk about embedded solutions, and there's been a lack of acknowledgement that sort of the add-on insurance is the sort of version 1 of this type of coverage, and how do you I appreciate it's probably all in the customer experience, but I want to talk about the kind of culture of the customer. So to a certain extent, do you think there's a cynicism around buying insurance, and how do you overcome that? Because until someone claims, to a certain extent, do you think the consumer sees the difference? Because essentially, for example, flight cancellation cover has always been there. You can always kind of click, yes, I want that cover. We're talking about a better, more efficient, more kind of bespoke version of that. But how do you deal with that kind of customer perception of buying these types of products?
So insurance is actually probably not the most popular word we would use in that sense, and that you're absolutely right. Because each time we think about that, we have all this kind of things in mind. Usually you pay something, then I'm kept for the next 3-5 years, because they're usually 3-5 year long contracts. If something happens, I usually need to wait 3 months, 6 months if they pay at all, or if nothing happens, I basically paid for the next 5 years, and why should I do that? Obviously, that's usually the perception, and the reason for this is very also simple, because obviously, also the structure of a classical product is exactly that way. That it's designed for. Once you actually have something, you're actually glad to have it. But that's only in one of 500 cases the case. So where we actually feel the difference. So that's what we fundamentally change. And that's, I get say, why we're not talking about insurances. We actually talk about solutions. That's why we have, as I said, we love claims. That's why we have designed our approach in a way that you not get paid every 200th time, but we actually paid every 6th or 7th time to actually feel the difference. That's why we cover just one single event, so you don't have to lock yourself in for a year to do so, etc. And you don't have to wait another 3 months to get paid or not, because it's basically parametric, as you said at the beginning. So we can decide basically on the spot, or technology can decide on the spot to do that. Which gives you a fundamentally different way of how we operate, also in a fundamentally different way how we can interact with the customer. Because usually, traditional product is fire and forget. You buy it, and hopefully nothing happens. And 5 years later, somebody calls and says you should renew your contract. So we changed that by we also kind of saying, assuming you have a monthly cover or a couple of days cover, if something, even if not something happens, so there's no damage, nothing, we congratulate you that that didn't happen. So you have a much more interactional setup than you have today, which brings you top of mind of all the business partners, which they love, because all of a sudden you have a solution or a setup that generates much more positive interactions with your end customers. So I would say that's the fundamental difference. And not talking about the transparency we actually offer. You know exactly what you get, and overall it's much cheaper way than the other, because you just buy when you need it.
Yeah, I think touch points with the customer has always been a bit of an issue from insurance, as you touched on there. You should buy it, you hope you don't use it, you never engage, and then if you do engage, it's usually because it's usually because you're having a negative experience. So, but I mean, just getting that claims piece right, I think in itself is enough. But you don't want every customer to have a claim just so you can interact with them, just so you can impress them. I wanted to sort of go back to the sort of regulatory environment. Where are you kind of, what's the limitations at the moment in terms of kind of your geographic reach? Where are your kind of operating markets?
So we operating all across Europe. Obviously, we are fully licensed in Ireland, both as an underwriter and insurance company, regulated by the CBI, as well as a distribution MGA set up in the same territories. And that allows us to operate all across Europe, and we cooperate also with other FGAs to do so. So that gives us actually quite a broad span of how we can distribute stuff and how we operate with that. So that's, I guess, the setup we running with.
I know this. It was mentioned ahead of this meeting that this type of embedded model and personalized, hyper-personalized insurance has been very successful in Asia. Why do you think the region specifically welcomes this kind of type of engagement in the insurance industry? Is there something culturally happening there? Has the digitalization of banking been faster there? Is this specific to the region that you think is kind of opened the door to the more kind of embedded / parametric model that you're operating?
Well, probably it's a combination of 4 or 5 factors. One is obviously there is a large number of people, or a pretty big population, that allows you to drive digital businesses, because it's at the end also a numbers game. Meaning you need a certain amount of people that actually make it scalable. So that's one. Second, it's a fast-growing area or fast-growing region over time. That is usually very good to try out new things. So basically, because you don't eat into somebody else's cake, you actually can conquer new spaces, which is helpful. Thirdly, I would argue it's less insurance driven, or let's say less overinsured as Europe might be over the past. So there's much less coverage out there. And thirdly, I would also say that some of the business platforms over there are quite innovative and quite fast growing, which is probably different in Europe than in Asia. And that combination allows you to try out things completely different in a way to do that. Because obviously there's also not that much, how you say, large incumbents that have, which each and every one of us 2, 3, 4, 5 policies for the next 5 years, different concepts. So that allows you to do a lot of innovation and a lot of testing and setups, and they've done this quite successfully.
Yeah, and it's an interesting testing ground for sort of against the sort of European piece. How do you penetrate a market like Europe? And I appreciate that's a huge, you've got so many different geographies there that have sort of different relationships with the insurance. But in kind of the broadest possible strokes, it's a very mature market. It's got a mature relationship with insurance. How do you specifically penetrate that market with which were outside looking in, like you and I are talking insurance at a kind of, well, you at an expert level and me slightly above amateur level, and so therefore we kind of understand the nuances of this. But from a consumer's perspective, how do you penetrate those markets where they've got such established players?
Well, you mean the underwriters, or you mean the business partners?
I suppose this is more for your business partners in terms of kind of where they sort of drive that. But I suppose mainly to change that question slightly, then, how have you seen
that? I can answer that. That's a simple. So I just was not sure which one you're talking about.
No. But it's an interesting point. But if you're open to answering it, I might ask a follow-up question. Actually,
I can give you that answer. There's some good things to be in Europe, because, as we said at the beginning, add-on insurance has been around for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So they all understand how the, let's say, add-on insurance world ticks.
Mm-hmm.
So then you could argue, like, okay, there's no room for Companjon because there's plenty of large traditional players that do add-on insurance. So the thing is, they all now realize that their current processes and their current way of go-to-market with their own products, I mean the business partners' products, is fundamentally different than the old style way of how to do business with a classical insurance setup. Meaning, doesn't matter who you take. If you take, the large entertainment platforms, if you take the large booking platforms, if you take the large event platforms, doesn't matter who you take. They all operate in a new way or in a modern way of how to interact and test out with your clients.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, you try out things, you do UX testing, etc., in an agile mode. I know that's also a very stretched word over the last 5 to 10 years. But what it basically means is you run A/B testing all the time. You kind of alter your products and offerings all the time. So all of a sudden you have this mentality moving forward at large scale, and you have a classical traditional product as an add-on space, which kind of doesn't fit into that thinking anymore. And that's offers us quite a good entry door, to be fair, because we actually can do all this. So we can change the T's and C's as we do the underwriters. We can change the prices up and down. We can change the geographies by country, the different underwriting criteria if we want accordingly. So we can fulfill all these needs given we are completely born digitally and operate exactly in the same way and have the authority to actually underwrite it ourselves. So this is actually a very good entry door for us, as many others, but that's an obvious one, so I thought I mentioned that.
Yeah, no, sure. And the follow-up question that I was going to sort of change my question to slightly was that I was going to ask you if any of your partners have done anything particularly innovative, i.e., had they offered something unusual in terms of cover that they've come to you with, or are they any sort of promoting the cover in a slightly more unusual way? Because there's so much change happening in this space, and I think it seems to be sort of imagination is almost the kind of limitation on where this goes. So I wonder if there's anything particularly innovative that you've spotted with your partners that's caught your eye.
Well, I guess some of them are, I would say, very innovative. There's some couple of things will come out this year that you wouldn't have thought about you could do. on that sense. And then you have other things like our minute match product, for instance, which you wouldn't have thought of, which is, I guess, also well known in the market now, or zero, or basically no exclusion products, which we also offer, which you would have thought a year ago wouldn't be possible. We were the first ones to actually do them. You know, the stuff like that, which is, I guess, quite a unique setup in that way. And also on the weather side, there will be some very, I would say, great innovations coming along the way, I guess, for 2022.
The sort of the basis of kind of embedded insurance is obviously for your partners, it offers an additional revenue stream. But there seems to be a large part of certainly the kind of promotional aspect of Companjon and the website is about kind of improvement of the customer experience. Obviously, it offers most partners both, but is there a kind of sense of what's driving most of your partners to kind of add this on? Because this sort of customer experience piece and ownership of customers seems to be kind of the most heavily emphasized piece. So I wondered if do some partners approach you with a bit of an either or they always looking for both? What's kind of driving those relationships?
Well, I would say that depends a bit where the different partners are positioned and what they want to achieve in any of these things. What it definitely does, it significantly improves your NPS scores, so that's clear. It allows you to, as a business partner, to interact much more with your end customers in a very positive way. It also sometimes fulfills the promise of what you're living for and stand for, or it just makes the life of the end customer easier, or you just are reminded that you have a cover with a certain setup. Simple example: if you have a credit card, we all have actually purchase protection, but nobody thinks about that they have it. So why shouldn't you remind your customers regularly that you have it? So there are several very positive setups, which then also allows you, given the way we operate, is we try to fuel the ecosystems of our partners. So meaning all the revenue streams, all the financial streams should go actually through our partner. So they own the end customer, to be clear. And that kind of fuels their ecosystem, which makes them more top of mind, where they're all fighting for. You want to be top of mind of your end customer, being if you're a neobank, if you're a travel provider, if you want to be top of mind, and every of these positive interactions allow you for that. So that's why we also kind of fuel back all the revenue streams into their ecosystem to make sure that the customer stays there, and that creates at the end more satisfaction. As I said, NPS scores goes up. More returning customers for them, which meaning then at the end also more revenues just on their side without the stuff we might pay them.
Talking about customer experience, one of the things that Parametrics allows you to do, I'm probably thinking particularly about travel, and I was wondering about the claims experience. So you've obviously got these instantaneous parametric style payment, but one of the challenges with travel is that if I want to travel to, let's say, Spain for a specific time, I still want to get to Spain. So getting paid is great, but kind of do any of your partners offer kind of sort of a different result, a sort of alternative kind of travel, or is it always kind of just on receiving the money back?
Well, that really depends a bit on how the solution should work. So there are different options. So there's obviously the cashback option, which is already something. Depends also the way why you had to cancel your trip. And there are partners that say, like, then they will take care of a rebooking of that setup, which we will not provide. Sure. But that they are both options actually even today already available. So yeah, that's part of their value proposition, then where we be part of their ecosystem.
Sure. And from a practical sense, I wanted to get an understanding of how quickly you could kind of spin up a partnership. And I know clearly it's dependent on the offering and the product suite and the partner. But what's the kind of minimum time that you could provide an embedded solution that's, let's say, it's something bespoke and slightly not on the kind of suite of products that you've already kind of engaged with other people?
So probably would. So assuming we have signed the contract, always done. So
sure, yes.
So I would say very simple. So to connect you with us on a standard off-the-shelf product, 4 weeks max. That means fully tested, up and running, and ready to do high loads of data transactions. If you then say, okay, we need a little bit of amendments, changes, probably 6 weeks, max 8 to go live then. If you then want to fundamentally have your own product in whatever shape or form, then it might take a little longer. But usually our product cycles are very, very fast. And that includes, as I said, the whole security setup, the whole data testing setup, the whole load testing, etc., which is also key these kind of in this world. I mean, our security standards on the cybersecurity is really, really high. We belong to top 5% globally. NTT provides us with all that data security, which we live up to, because the trust that people have in us needs to be protected. So that might take a couple of days.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
So very fast.
Yeah. It's phenomenally fast. And I wanted to just, we were talking off camera, as it were, earlier, and I did want to take us back, although nobody wants to relive the past 24 months particularly. But you launched. You had a little bit of a runway before the pandemic hit, but I'm always interested to know, what impact that had on the business. From a business perspective, good and bad, and but also did it involve any sort of pivoting from your kind of plans that kind of changed the business model at any point?
Well, did it impact us on several dimensions? Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Did we anticipate it that long? Not at all. Have we managed through it quite successfully? Absolutely. So probably I can give you a little bit on all these, the flavor on all these points. Well, obviously, as we set up Companjon, and then a couple of weeks later, we all went into lockdown. Probably was not as we thought. That's a great start. But it forced us to, so in hindsight, it forced us to do things completely different right from the beginning, where we still benefit from. All our processes are fully digital, our signatures. We are a fully regulated company, so we have to sign stuff properly. We have to make sure that all the policies are in place, etc., etc., etc. We had to recruit people without seeing them. We had to design new interview guidance lines, interview processes, just to give you a few things. How to interact with authorities in a world where you cannot just go over and sign a contract or discuss something, etc. So that was probably a little bit more challenging at the beginning, absolutely. Now it helps us because everything we have is purely digital and it works fully digital, which is nice and makes us fast. And we can work basically 24/7 out of any country in the world. That stays with, you had to set up infrastructure that allows you to work from everywhere, etc., etc., etc. So that's the benefit. The challenge, obviously, is, as you all know, building relationships also with business partners. It is much tougher if you do it over a video conference than sitting together and discussing this for 2 hours or 3 hours and seeing the reaction of the person and not just a nice face on that thing. So this is obviously makes things a little bit more tougher for us. And obviously the pickup or the challenges our business partners had, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when you think about September, October, November 2020, were quite severe. They fought for their survival, some of them. So then there's room then for Companjon you could think of. On the other hand, we were able to take over some of their risks, which was highly appreciated by them, and made them even more successful once it picked up a bit later, early 2021. So that I would say were all the challenges we were operating under, while still trying to get the license, the 2 licenses, which we got despite all the, let's say, also the regulator had to change the way of working, which obviously was not easy for both sides to get that along the side. But it worked out well. So I would say there are a lot of challenges for us. There are quite some good stuff we can take on with, and we also needed to change the way of once we go back to the office and how that will work, because we have all now proven that we can actually work from home. we still need to keep to make sure then there's this I would say companion way of living or working, the companion way of how we collaborate with each other, how we challenge each other, etc. And the certain corporate culture you have. So there will be times where we get together, there will be times when we all work from wherever people are want to be. So that's probably also a learning coming out of the last 24 months.
Yeah. I asked that question because I'm always interested, of the learnings, and I think universally we've had to think smarter. Whereas it's very easy to sleepwalk into, this is how we've always done it. Let's get an office. Let's and so kind of thinking about these things, particularly the irony of being kind of such sophisticated business models. It's all about digital kind of nativeness and people who are digitally fluent, that it seems obvious that this is the business structure you would have, but as we know in insurance, it kind of took a pandemic to kind of kick that off, and so we're going to see much more of that. But look, I always like to sort of finish, and I'm very conscious of your time on talking about what's coming up in 2022. I felt like we touched on a few kind of innovative things that you weren't able to talk about because they're not quite live yet. But in terms of what you are able to talk about, I'd love to kind of hear what's coming up for 2022, and what people should be aware of, because I know you said you were hiring, so I kind of wanted to highlight that. You're always looking for good people, but what's happening in 2022 people should look out for?
Oh, a good question. So obviously, we were lucky to get the Insurance Top 100 award in 2021, which we obviously didn't expect at all, and we were quite it was very great surprise for us. When I look for Companjon in 2022, obviously we will see, as you said, we hiring quite a bit of people, because our biggest challenge is actually finding the right talent, and that's probably also the biggest competition is to have the best people, which we are proud of to have, but also to keep them, and also to grow the team significantly in one or the other departments, to make sure we can keep up the speed and the development, because as you rightly said, it's not made just by technology, because at the end it's more like who has the great ideas and the sparkling setups that allow us to move as fast as we have done over the last 2 years. So in terms of solutions, I guess there will be quite some interesting solutions hitting the market again, as we did in 2021. We might come up with 3-4 other very interesting setups, which are hopefully a little bit mind-boggling or surprising in whatever shape or form. And I'm also convinced that we're going to continue to grow our base, not only in Ireland significantly, but all across Europe, in whatever shape or form to do that. So we're looking at a quite prosperous future if I look at that at the moment, which is great, which puts us also quite some responsibilities on our shoulders, that.
Mm-hmm.
But we are happy to take on that challenge on the other end and push forward as we did the last 2 years. So, as always, I'm sure there will be one or the other occasion to talk to you again, because it's always good. It's great, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to actually have that chat.
No, not at all. And congratulations on listing on the top 100. It was a great thing to see. And I'm sure there'll be more plaudits to come. But look, thank you, Matthias. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you being a guest on the Leadership Insurance podcast. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Alex.
Bye.